Hi, my name is Jack Johnson. I'm the Public Education Outreach Coordinator for the Pickens County Landfill. Welcome back to Talkin' Trashy. Some of our longtime viewers may notice a big absence here today. I certainly do. My partner on this show, Liz O'Connell, has only very reluctantly allowed me permission to present this episode of Talkin' Trashy without her, but don't fear, she will be back very soon for our next episode. We're going to do things a little bit differently today. Today we're doing an interview. There are a lot of different ways that we in contemporary society can reduce waste at the source. The EPA hierarchy of waste diversion even ranks source reduction through reuse and repurposing higher than recycling. And one of the things we're going to do today is talk to a local artist about ways that she uses found objects and repurposed and reused materials in her art. We often work with local artists and nonprofits such as Anderson Ranch to allow people to photograph the landfill because many people find beauty in waste, and also an opportunity to find some objects to reuse in their art. If you are affiliated with such an organization, please give me a call at the number below or send me an email. I can give you a tour of the landfill and we can talk about opportunities that may exist. As will be revealed at the end of this or through the process of this interview that you're about to watch, you will see that increasingly we have new programs at the landfill. One of them that's coming on board very soon is a textile diversion program. And I think, like I said, that the reason I mentioned that will be revealed. Please give me a call for a tour of the landfill or to learn more about ways in which the Pickens County landfill can be responsive to your needs. Thank you very much for joining us. Hi, and here we are with Shere Coleman. She's a local artist, and she uses repurposed and recycled materials as a major component and purpose in her work. Welcome, Shere. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Could you just sort of talk about your background, how long you've been in Aspen, where you went to school, where you moved from, and that sort of thing?
Yes, my husband and I moved to Aspen 10 years ago, and we moved from Portland, Oregon, where I spent most of my growing up years, not all of them, but most of them. And Oregon has always been a leader in recycling and in general environmental awareness. So I grew up with that way of thinking, and my family was terrific. We had a compost heap in the backyard when I was a teenager. I remember, I think that's when my mother started. But we really, we didn't produce a lot of garbage, and we used everything, and we reused things. And my mother was an artist, my father an architect. So making things with our hands was just something that we did. We actually thought everybody did that all the time.
Did you use that then when you have a fine arts degree?
So I have a fine arts degree in painting, and partly because when I went to school, I think there was much encouragement to choose the classic, be a painter, a sculptor, a printmaker, and it's a wonderful, wonderful background. At some point, I used what I was learning and had learned to ask, what materials do we have a lot of? And also, what is the impact of any materials that you use? And I've been very conscientious about that for a long time, because I ask myself, if it isn't really healthy for me to use, then it's really probably not healthy for the environment either. So it starts with me, but it's a bigger question.
Did anybody, I'm an architect, and I come from an architecture background, and we often use like old beer cans and beer holders to make models out of anything that was at hand.
Yeah.
But it was never the final product. Did you struggle with repurposing materials in your schools? or in your educational background?
I don't remember having much introduction to that, other than one program. Actually, this was back east, and we had an assignment to work with found objects, and there was a bit of condescension about that. And that was a good maybe 30 years ago, quite a long time. And I think we've come a long way in seeing them differently. I think one of the very interesting things about materials we choose and tying them into artistic thinking is looking at them differently. Looking at them
Beyond what they
beyond what they are,
to
which
what-
is always a very sort of fascinating thing, an exercise to do with your brain, because we have assumptions about materials.
Well, you've brought a lot of stuff, and we're going to show a lot of images, but let's talk for a little bit about some of the raw materials
Yes.
that you now use as
Okay.
if they were,
Okay.
art supplies.
Yes.
So just tell us about your use of glass.
Okay, well, bottles, I think, are beautiful. They're beautiful shapes, and they're beautiful, often beautiful colors, and there's a variety. And I hadn't thought to tell you this. I mean, I hadn't even thought to tie this in. But one of my ancestors was I don't know if he was a founding member, but he was a significant partner in the Sandwich Glass
Oh, in
Works
England.
in Sandwich, Massachusetts.
okay.
And so I have glass in my background, and
In your blood, as it were.
and I actually hadn't thought about that, except I had a reintroduction to that just a few weeks ago. But I've always collected them.
And this, I mean, the
Yeah.
image that we're looking at on the screen, this is a lovely composition in itself.
In
I mean,
itself,
that's
right.
many
Yeah.
people would consider that a
That's
finished
so funny.
product.
That's so funny. I don't think about that.
But you are using these in what way? Do you break them, or?
I don't break them. I fill them, and part of that comes from as a formally trained or educated person in the arts. One of my true fascinations and appreciations is for outsider artists. There are components to that are so personal and personally driven. I think I'm fascinated by bottle trees, by little effigies. I'm
Like
fascinated
some of our
by
southern artists that you
Southern
find.
artists. I'm fascinated by what's produced in voodoo culture
Oh.
as often, and what's the essence of those things.
And oftentimes those people, at least from what I've studied, they're using found objects because they were too poor to have anything else. So their artistic
Right.
expression was finding its being found out through what was there in their everyday lives.
Exactly, and I admire that. I think those are often unsung heroes of awareness and paying attention to what's around you. And so
This
these
is
are
a new
just
piece, you
so
said.
this is a new piece, and I wanted a container that was interesting, and I thought of building one, and then I thought, well, no, if I build one, I am going to have to use newish materials in most cases. So I went to the thrift store, the wonderful thrift store, and I actually found 3 different sort of cubicle units that could be holders. But this was my favorite one, and it was brown. It wasn't too
So you
pretty.
put a wash on
So
it.
I sanded it and washed it and sanded it some more till, and now I'm much more interested in its surface and its texture. And I want contrast, which is previously it was dark, and if I put the dark bottles in there, they were going to get a little bit lost. So some of these are things that have been with me for a long time. Quite a few years ago, I think when my niece was studying and striving for a particular career path, I made a bottle tree, and I put messages in the bottle tree that had to do with these people that were close to me, what their dreams were, and I hung them outside. And so several of these with the strings on them,
Are
maybe that's the
rejected from
are from that.
Oh,
yeah,
so
and
you've
so
repurposed,
I've repurposed my own sort of stuff, and then this is, I guess, another purposing of something. I I work with wood a lot, and so I
And
I
you'll
end up
carve
collecting, and I
yourself?
carve, and I will confess that I really like power tools. I
Mm-hmm.
really do like power tools, but I love the hand. I love the process of the hand, and so I'm not an absolute purist in terms of that.
Well, you can see traces of the hand in a
Yeah,
lot of your work.
yeah. So, and then these are little stones that were gathered on a beach holiday in Sicily. And then one of my friends, when she closed her yarn shop, gave me wonderful little bits and bobs that have
Was that Jan?
gradually. Yeah, it was Jan, and so they've shown up. Yeah, and I think this bottle, I actually remember its origin, and I think it was it was an essential oil that was called Mary Magdalene, and it was for creating very loving essence in your life. And I did use it all up, which is lovely. And then one of my dear friends gave me some beautiful old fabric with so there. When I look
it's
at them,
memento mori too.
it is that also. It's that also, and I buy into very much the idea that art making, the process of art making, and the creation of art does hold an energy. It holds the energy of the maker. It also holds the components and the collection of all of that. And so what that means, I don't necessarily know, but I honor it. I would say I honor it. So, this one is clearly a work in progress, and I don't know how it will ultimately come to be, but I'm pretty fascinated, and I love these bottles. They keep accumulating, and so it's time to put them someplace.
That's true. And something else I think that you accumulate a lot of are textiles.
I do.
So let's talk
Okay,
about
move to that one.
materials
Okay.
like sweaters and
Yes.
clothing and,
Okay.
and all the different ways in which you've used that
Okay.
in your work.
Okay, I began sewing when I was 5. It has never left my life, so I was accustomed to that and enjoy it very much. And it's moved me through a variety of different things. I've been a costume designer for ballet, for theater, and ultimately stop motion animation, which was a brilliant job.
Where did you do that? In Hollywood?
I did that in Portland,
Oh,
Oregon.
okay.
Portland, Oregon, with the studio that began as Will Vinton. They sort of earned their fame originally with the California Raisins, if you
okay.
remember.
I do remember.
And then
They were
moved on.
huge
They
in
were
the
huge,
80s.
and
They
they've
had
gone
their own
through.
hit song, I think.
Yeah, they've gone through many manifestations and growth periods, and they're now called Leica Entertainment. And the last job I had the great pleasure of working in pre-production on was Coraline, the story of Coraline.
In designing and making Coraline the lead actor, I went through a lot of drawings, sculptures, a lot of versions of her hair to refine her to become this character that you could bring to life. The main thing was just let her be a beacon of color. We put a lot of love and care into all the choices of how she looks.
So, that doll, did you make it look like me?
In animation, there's this interesting combination of talent to bring the characters to life.
There's 24 frames per second. In each one of those frames, you will have to move maybe 20 little pieces, fingers and arms and legs and head and hair. You've got to keep focused or it's not going to work out properly.
You want to believe they're flesh and blood when they're on the screen. You want to believe that if Coraline's in danger, it's real danger. She's not just a toy that nothing bad could happen to.
I feel like I'm surrounded by magic all day long. I see people creating things out of nothing. I see little bits of silicone and metal and cloth come to life and really live, breathe, and emote. And to see that happen, to know that everything you see moving, everything you see has been put together by somebody, crafted by somebody. It's just an incredible thing. We're creating worlds here, and we're creating living, breathing things, and it's just a wonderful thing to be a part of.
That was a wonderful movie.
It was a wonderful movie.
Showed here at Film
Wonderful
Fest,
movie.
and-
So, oh, it did. I didn't know that. Maybe I was.
It didn't premiere here,
Yeah,
but it did show.
Oh, good, good. It's an incredible creative process with many people who are highly skilled. So materials were significant in that job too. But when I moved to Aspen, I no longer had the resources that I was so accustomed to.
You didn't have the vintage shops. And
Well, I didn't have the vintage shops, but at that point, I just fabric stores that had terrific choices of many, many kinds. So now, when I need fabric,
So being
I
industrious.
typically just go to the thrift store and buy things and I look for textures and colors and patterns.
you can just show some of these.
Yes, I will. So, and all of them have been cut into, as you're soon to see. So they do soon lose their sleeves, and I make quite a few puppets,
Right.
puppetry, and the older. I won't say traditional because it's a really multivaried medium, and
you save your scraps.
I
as
save
well.
scraps down to
So you may
fairly
use a sleeve
small.
off of this.
Yep. And then most sweaters have, you get this wonderful
Right.
ribbing that has certain properties, and then the tighter, smoother weave of the sweater body.
Do you generally tend to knits? Because these are all knits.
I do more knits. I hadn't really thought
I
about
guess
that. It's absolutely true.
Well, one thing I would think is
Yeah.
that it allows you to stuff them, and they can take shapes,
They
and
can
you
take
can
sh- yeah.
manipulate them more than
Yeah.
you can with a stiff cotton or
Well,
or a woven
yeah,
fabric.
that's true. I think maybe the choices are richer in sweater material here. So there's that one. This is a sleeve.
This
I've
is
made.
just I don't know. Oh, it's a hoodie.
It's a hoodie.
Or it was.
Yeah, and I think this is really funny because I haven't used it for a while, and I noticed that apparently I really like the pockets.
must have.
And because they're gone.
And you don't remember what they went to?
No, I don't. Which, yeah, that happens. Sometimes you produce a lot of stuff and it doesn't all log in
And
permanently.
I do remember that sweater.
Do you remember this one?
When Shere and I first met, it was through felted wools,
Yeah.
and I
And
got out of
look at
it
this
and gave her
lovely-
a lot of my materials, and I definitely remember
Yeah, some
just
of
that
these.
gray sweater.
I know, and that's such a great pattern. Someday, actually, does it? No, I was thinking one of my creatures had that part of that pattern. Here, so now I want to show maybe a couple
let's
of
show
ways
the
that
finished-
they're used,
the finished work.
things. Okay. So since these are right on the table, we'll start with this. So this is for a very recent project, which was a puppet telling of the story Frederick. And it's made out of, and this is one of the sweaters that I rated from my own closet because, frankly, this is not a good color on me. And so, but it's much better on a mouse.
That is the mousiest of mouse colors.
It's
I
a
think.
good mousy color.
Yes.
And then I needed actually a total of 5. I didn't have enough in the remainder of that sweater. So here's a.
This is a
yep.
story you're telling, and these are the props you're using to illustrate it.
Yes.
That you've made
Yes.
by hand.
Yes.
Is it a story that because you're a storyteller
I
as
am a
well? Is
storyteller.
this a story that you invented?
No, it's written by Leo Leone. It's been around for quite a long time. It's a lovely little story about harvest.
5 mice?
About 5 mice. And so I had the great fortune of 2 girls who helped me tell the story, and they did the hand puppet part of it.
Okay.
So yes, they're pretty fun and they feel good in there.
They're adorable.
Yeah, so those are the mice. This guy just sat. This is Frederick himself.
And
but I
he's
could
just
put
too
my-
lazy to move, or
he's,
what?
Well, he
That's a
seemingly
joke.
lazy.
I don't
He
know
is
the
seemingly lazy,
story.
but as it turns out, he is the artist
Oh,
in the
I
story,
see.
and he's conjuring
Oh, he does.
and
I
imagining. But I could
see.
have him on the stage, put my fingers in, and then gesture, because the hands, after all, are quite expressive.
Yes, ma'am.
So those, and then the two puppets behind, which are quite large, and I just gave myself.
Now those are traditional. Are they semi-marionettes? I think anything that has an apparatus makes something a marionette, doesn't it? Or do you know, or is it maybe the articulation of the different joints that makes?
My
I guess what we're
understanding,
asking
right,
is, what's the difference between a puppet and a
a
marionette? And I don't know
I think
the
a
answer.
marionette typically operates from strings.
Oh, okay.
And typically operates from strings from above.
Okay.
But it's also kind of good to note that puppetry is so varied, and the level of imagination that people bring to the art is phenomenal. It's some of the most imaginative theater.
Well, yeah, it sort of has to be because, or I guess what I'm trying to say is, it would be difficult to bring something inanimate to life and be believable, more so than it would be to act from within oneself and just use one's own instrument or body.
Right, yeah.
I mean, a puppet or a marionette, it makes you, is manipulated, and therefore you have to suspend your disbelief in a different way.
More quickly, I think you do.
That was
And
a very
which is
long-winded way of saying very little. I apologize. Let's talk about your actual puppet.
So these two are a group of, I think I made 5 of them, and it was just a challenge to sort of watch how Sesame Street and Jim Henson puppets were constructed, and then see how that went. And it's
And how
really
did it
fun.
go?
It went really well.
Yes, they look very believable, and they're
went
very
really well.
imaginative.
Thank you.
And there's very little new material there.
There's the felt, I would say, is new, but
Because you don't
yeah.
go to the trouble of making your own felted. Like when you need a smooth new thing, you buy a piece
buy
of
Typically, what I do is
You're
buy
not
a
needle
great
felting
big. No, I'm
everything.
not. I'm not, and I've never done that actually.
Well, I've got all the
Which I think
tools
would
if
be
you'd ever
very-
like to.
okay.
I haven't
But
done it
sounds
either.
like a workshop.
Yeah,
And it is. I love what people create with that
it can be very
medium.
interesting.
So felt is one of my favorite materials to work with. There's so many things you can do. It responds to heat and pressure, and it dyes well. So I often buy a very large amount of it and then dye it to the colors I want.
Well, let's move on to some of the other projects that you've been on. What is this right here?
I don't know, Jack, if you have attended any of the Justice Snow's events.
I have been to 2.
Okay, so
Like a
there's
poetry
salons
reading.
and there's poetry and then there's storytelling. And for one salon, this is a great leap of bravery for me. I designed a stand-up comic puppet, and this was the MC that came out.
Right.
And so
Let me hold it.
yes. And if you can move his mouth with those 2 sticks together up and down, and then he can kind of talk a little bit. And that was completely fun to do. Certainly challenging, because I think stand-up comedy is incredibly challenging.
So who did there was another object like this that was actually doing the comedy.
Right.
Did you invent the routine, the skit?
I did, yes, I did.
And did you perform that as
I
well?
did.
And so you stood up there and told jokes through an object
Through
that you
a
made.
puppet, yeah.
Did that make the joke telling a little bit easier? Because I don't know
kind
you
of.
all that well, but you don't have a whole lot of stand-up comedian about you, in my experience.
No, I
Am
don't.
I wrong?
You're completely wrong. I like to think I have a sense of humor, but it's relatively subtle.
Yes. And it's certainly not baudy like
no,
so
not
many.
too baudy. No, not too baudy. So it was entirely fun, and I think that's one of the beauties of puppets is, especially more for children. It's more noticeable with children. But I think it's true of everyone that once you either slip your hand into a big puppet or pick up the strings, you're really freed. That object is talking in spite of you, in a way. It isn't entirely because you have a connection to it, but it's a very kind of, it comes back to the spirit of different forms. And I think that puppetry historically has been with us from the beginning of time, along with oral storytelling. They're two of the oldest ways that humans have entertained each other, by picking up an object and having it represent something else. Or I like to imagine early cave dwellers casting shadows on the wall and entertaining and entering into another way of thinking and being. So this is all fascinating stuff to me.
It is, and you've got a lot greater body of work than we're able to discuss here today. But we are going to put your website up on in this program, and maybe include some more images at the end. But one thing that you have is a work in progress, where you've taken materials.
Are we talking this one?
The Tupperware container.
The
I want to show our audience how you are thinking about a material that is generally thrown into the landfill and discarded and never considered again. And you're about to make something out of it. So if you could just show us what you have here and where they came from and what your ideas are about what they may become.
So this is my collection so far of those wonderful meshy bits that
sleeves
hold,
for onions and limes
yeah.
and lemons.
Yeah. And maybe my initial interest is that I have always loved hats that had the webbing.
Oh,
and so when I see this, I just think, oh, that's so beautiful. So I don't yet have a plan. My most recent idea, and it hasn't quite come to be yet, was sea forms that were wrapped in this.
Oh,
because
to make
whenever
like urchins and
any
anemones
kind of animal that lives in the sea, because of the tragic stories that we know about how plastics collect in the sea and how they're found in the stomachs of sea creatures, and that they really are impacting their well-being and their health. And so that's...
So you may make a comment on pollution.
I may make a comment on that. Yes, I may. That's the idea I'd like to play with. I prefer for myself to make the statements I make and have the viewer meet me part way. So I don't want one that is so overtly heavy hitting. I guess that's maybe the best way to say it. So I don't know where this is going.
Rather than telling.
Yeah, showing rather than telling, or rather than shaking my finger. It's more of an observation of, well, this is something that we all encounter throughout the week with our fruits and vegetables.
Yes.
And it's very useful for holding them.
And it has an impact both in the sea and in the land.
And in the land. So, and it's also
seeing
a pretty fabulous sort of color palette too.
And I look forward to seeing this when you're finished with it. Thank you so much for joining us on Talkin' Trashy, Shere. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
I got a litter story. Put your ear near.
Pitkin County Landfill conserves our environment and extends the life of our landfill through innovative, sustainable methods. They offer educational programs on recycling, composting, and more. Pitkin County Landfill. We handle it. More at landfillrules.com.